So typically when I'm hiring, I like to see how they are, how they live. So a lot of times it, it ranges, but if it's something where I'm like, you're a referral from a friend who I trust as an organized human, then that's a little bit different. But if you're a blind hire, then, oh, absolutely, I want to see your spaces, because you can't be a representation of a neat brand if you're not neat yourself.
So this is a fascinating interview. Today on the podcast, we had Lauren Alsup, who owns The Neat Method. I got the privilege of working with her last spring. I actually surprised my wife and did a cleaning of our home and organizing. So her company basically goes into people's homes, organizes, and gives you essentially a methodology so that you can keep your house clean and orderly. So if you're looking for a great idea for a spouse, a client, we're actually going to use Lauren and her team to help us with our upcoming artisan tour home. I think one thing that I've not done well enough in my career is design closets, but in this case, we're going to actually organize the closets ahead of time to really show people what they can do. So without further ado, here's Lauren Alsup. Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I'm joined with Lauren Alsup from The Neat Method. Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, it was so fun. I was trying to think. So when we're hopping on talking about this beforehand, you and I met through our good friend Morgan Molitor. I think you'd known her for at least a couple of years. Is that right?
Yes, I have. So I've known Morgan for a couple of years. We actually got introduced when she was renovating her current house, and we did some work with her in her current house, and then it kind of formed into a partnership with her business, and we've worked on a ton of clients together.
And so you own and operate The Neat Method, and we'll talk a little bit more about our past in a second, but why don't you explain what your company is and how you got into it, and then we'll circle back on some of the relationship stuff here in a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So Neat Method is a luxury home organizing company. We work with any space within a home, but primarily focus on your high traffic, high potential areas. So think about like primary closets, bathrooms, kids' closets, playrooms, kitchens, pantries, any of that. In certain markets, we get creative and we have things like boat houses or pool houses or things of that nature. But in Minnesota, it's mainly indoor spaces.
Yeah. And I can't remember where the home that Morgan worked on, that was her artisan home. Did you do any work there?
We did. And actually, funny enough, so we had staged that house with products, and a client of ours actually bought that house. And so we have been back to that house several times. I know it quite well.
Interesting. I know who the person is, and we won't share the name on this, but so they were your client before that, and then they bought the home. So it was like, oh, wow, that's a small world.
Yes, they've been a client of mine for a little over a year. And so we transitioned with them into that house from their previous home.
So it's interesting, and I want to do a deep dive on this, but maybe just from a personal side, I'm a pretty neat person. My wife is OCD neat. She's very neat. And so I actually thought, I think it was around Mother's Day, wasn't it? Was it Mother's Day? So it was last spring. I had met you, and I thought it'd be really fun to surprise my wife. And so I had you and your company come in. I think it was you and 3 or 4 of your coworkers. And my wife was working that day. I remember planning it around when she was gone. And the idea was we were going to organize the whole house. So specifically my closets, my wardrobe, the garage was huge, and the storage room. And mainly because like my wife is always, when are you going to do this? And I think this is just anytime you co-inhabit a space with people. In hindsight, maybe we should have had you help with the kids' bedrooms. And in fact, that would have been nice. But anyway, long story short, you came in and I was there to help. Hey, sometimes you need someone. I'm not someone that holds on to stuff forever. It's cathartic to be like, go or no go. And sometimes when someone else holds you accountable, you're like, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. And actually, you'd be proud of me. I actually just switched out my wardrobes from summer to fall, and I threw away gave away another 30, 40 pieces just in the cleansing mode. But anyway, someone asked me, so you label everything, you've got these little baskets. A lot of it is just teaching people organizational methods. And someone had asked, well, like, that's great, Mark, but after 6 months, isn't it going to go back to how it was before? And the answer is no. In my case, just the simple stuff, the dividers. Sometimes we all have things that we can't do, or maybe we could do them, but there's mental blocks or whatever it might be, and we just need a little help over the edge. Honestly, what comes to mind is maybe someone knows how to exercise, but they have to hire a personal trainer, because it's the fact that they're paying that trainer to be accountable. They keep themselves accountable. I feel like I know that I paid for the services to help organize some big spaces in my home. I know I invested in those, and so I want to maintain that. Anyway, what are you seeing? Let's talk a little bit about That was just my personal side of it. But
Yeah.
what kind of clients are coming to you? How are they finding
Hmm.
you? And I'm sure you have got some hilarious stories
Oh,
that
sure.
I can't only imagine some of the stories you'd have.
Yeah. So the main reason people come to us is they're overwhelmed. They're mentally at their capacity. They know they could do it, but they don't have the time to do it or necessarily the want to do it. They'd rather spend their time doing something else, or they just can't figure out how the functionality works because they've been in the spaces too long. For instance, we're looking at a closet. You look at it every single day, and to you, it's probably never going to get better from what it is, but you need help. And so typically clients call us when they either have reached that point where they're like, okay, we need help. Or a lot of clients call us when they move, when they start fresh and they just want the whole house set up in a better way than they lived before. And we have a ton of clients also who just call us because they want to live better. They want to be able to have more time with their families. They want their systems overall to function better. They continue on the closet theme. Like they don't want to be doing the laundry and then the laundry gets stuck in a laundry basket because they have no guide as to where it goes or position as to where it goes. And so making those systems where they can go from A to B to C and it takes them far less time than it used to. It keeps them sane when they see those spaces all the time. And then also just it keeps everyone else in the home accountable for it.
And I think what appealed to me about it is I build custom homes for a living. And so we're
Hmm.
following a plan. There's a blueprint that after you do your rough-ins, like there's going to be insulation and sheetrock, there's
Hmm.
inspections. Like there is a path on how to build a house. There's obviously a
Hmm.
lot of art that goes into it and the artistry, of course, but there is a little bit of just math or science, right? 1 + 1 is 2 and 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
There's a critical path, you know what it is. And I think with organizing, what paralyzes people is they don't know where to start. But to your point, that unless you give them sort of the blueprint on what to do
Hmm.
after or create a system around it. I wonder if that's
Hmm.
not why even the name, the NEAT method, you're coming up with a
Hmm.
method. It's not just solving
Hmm.
the problem, you're creating a path, a work path.
Right.
Would that be a foundational principle of
Yeah,
the NEAT
I
method?
think for sure. Like the biggest thing is that we want to create something that works for you in your home. So we're not trying to say it's a one-stop shop that's going to work for everybody. We need to know. That's why we ask so many questions. Do you switch your wardrobes? What do you wear the most? What do you gravitate towards? What do you wear too much that you'd like to not be wearing as much? Who else needs to see this stuff? Who does your laundry? What days of the week do you do your laundry? Things of those questions, because that helps us to make the system that's going to function for you best. And for certain clients, we work with a lot of builders because we design a lot of storage spaces for them where you're designing the overall house. They'll call us and be like, I have 300 pairs of shoes. How do I fit that within this parameter? And what kind of closet do I need for that? And so a lot of things too is we're taking an idea that a client has and then executing it to fit their lifestyle and their needs so that when they're moving into these new homes, they're not regretting their choices when it comes to a closet system or wait, why did I put this in? I have 3 times as much clothes because the and I'm sure you experience this, the paralysis people can have when they have to make so many decisions when building a home or even just changing a wardrobe in and out. It can paralyze people. And so a lot of what we do too is just help them step over that bridge to the next moment of, yeah, you're going to live in the space and function in the space. And a lot of it's just the mental challenges that people face when it comes to that because they're just overwhelmed with all these choices.
And maybe I'm a good case study. Mine was essentially a remodel. We'd lived there several years, but it's no different than a new home
Hmm.
that you lived in for a while. Most of the stuff that you provided was organizational bins, labeling, things
Hmm.
like that. So the material lift was pretty low. If you're consulted, I've never thought about this, and obviously Morgan did this with her home with you. If you're going to build a new home, do
Hmm.
you offer closet systems? Are you
Hmm.
designing that with the closet designer? Like, how do you guys function
Yep.
together, or would you be competitors in that sense?
No, we aren't. So we have a bunch of partnerships with closet companies. And so what I would do is go in and say, all right, here's the, specs. Like this client needs 6 long hangs, 6 short hangs, 300 shoes. Like I come in with the raw facts and then let them build it. I
Okay.
am definitely not a closet provider, but I'm an information provider to those
Okay. So
systems.
yeah.
And then there's also some tactical things where space is pointless to me if I can't fit more than one bin within a certain space. So I'll say things like the shelves need to be at least 24 inches wide and they need to be at least 14 inches deep. Like things of that nature, just so it makes logical sense when you go and build it. So then when we bring in the products for it, then the products actually function as
So
well.
this is okay. This is fascinating. I must have missed that, obviously, because I didn't experience it. I'm relating most of this interview based on my personal experience. But in this case,
Hmm.
I actually like that. So let's, a lot of people that listen, obviously, are builders or remodelers, and we have clients, and
Hmm.
I've recommended you and will continue to do so. I think there's a,
Hmm.
actually, before I go down this rabbit hole, what percentage of your work is on new construction versus
Hmm.
going and helping people that already have a hot mess situation that you're trying to, ride in on a
Hmm.
red Superman cape?
I would lately, I would almost say it's 50 to 60% new builds.
Oh,
But yeah, this summer into fall, the last 2 weeks have been new builds, brand new homes. I'm trying to think. Overall, I think it's more probably like 70% of the latter and then 20% of new builds. But I would say this year, especially, it has been a ton of new builds.
so this is going into my next question then. So I'm designing a
Hmm.
home for a client. Obviously,
Hmm.
usually we interview the team. I'm a big team player. So we're going to get our architectural partner on board. We're going to get our
Hmm.
interior designer on board. We're going to spend several months working on cabinet elevations, selections, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. Traditionally, what I would do in this situation is whatever the architect design in terms of space, eventually when I send to bid it out, like I'm not
Hmm.
consulting with my closet designer. They have the space and it's
Right.
it's plenty big, but it's not, we're not actually asking for their involvement in design on the front end, which
Hmm.
leaves them obviously very little options to other than to conform to that space. But we're good at what you
Hmm.
do. But even if you're good at what you do, you're not an expert at everything. So then we
Hmm.
send it off to our closet designers. They'll come back with some, before they meet the client, they'll come back with just some initial concept sketches. I'll include that in my bid
Hmm.
package to the client. Once we're under contract, maybe once we get past the sheetrock phase, we'll
Hmm.
set up a meeting. So this is on our homes. They might be 6, 7 months into the build or whatever it is, maybe not that far,
Hmm.
5 months in. And we will have the closet designer meet with the client and the interior designer, and then they will work on designing out their stuff and get into the nitty gritty. That's how I've been doing it. Where
Hmm.
would I involve you? And should I be, obviously, everyone is going to say, we want to be probably at the architecture phase, which you can't have
Hmm.
everybody pulled back into the architecture
Hmm.
phase. You'll
Hmm.
never get anything done. But where realistically are you? Because it almost seems, are you doing the interview of the client first and then informing the closet designer and then approaching the client? Or what is the right sequence here?
No, so typically what we do is if I see, so I've done it both ways where I've had someone send me their blueprints and be like, do you think this is enough space for the closet that I need built? And if it is, then I'll be like, yeah, I think it's fine. Once we get further down the road, then we'll actually design it out. If I don't, and I'm like, what are you thinking? This is smaller than your current closet, and that drives you nuts, then I'll say something because I tend to, if we can rectify the issue earlier than later, it always saves everybody time and money. But for the most part, I would say once the sheetrock is up, is kind of where I come in and play and say, okay, so I know the stats on what the client needs. I can visually see what we're working with in terms of space. And usually, when you're doing a custom home, I know there's usually a closet budget. So I always advise in the beginning if someone's saying, I want a completely custom closet, then there's a little like reality check as to what that cost versus a, for lack of a better term, builder grade kind of closet where you're talking the difference in a closet from 5 grand to 30 grand and things of that nature. And just making people realize like what you see on Instagram or what you see on Pinterest for a primary built in closet doesn't necessarily translate depending on what your actual budget is for that space.
Interesting. What, looking back, going back more on the business side of things,
Hmm.
where are you? So the company was founded by Ashley and Marissa. I don't know how
Yes.
long ago that was, and how many total this is it considered a franchise?
Yes.
How many total
Hmm.
franchises are there in A, the state, and B, the country?
Hmm. So, Neat Method was founded by Ashley and Marissa back in 2011. And at that time, they had just a few markets. They were Chicago, San Francisco. And since then, we've expanded to about 100 markets.
Oh my.
And we are in the US and Canada. I am the only one in Minnesota. I have the whole state. So, we go all over the place. I was actually in St. Joseph, Minnesota, all last week. So, kind of all over. And Neat Method was really founded on the principle of we see all these beautiful design spaces on the exteriors, but then you open a cabinet or you open a closet and it's just a disaster. And so the functionality behind those spaces needs to work just as well as the design on the outside of the spaces. So we actually work with a ton of interior designers because they're the ones who are like, I'm buying this piece for my client. I need it to function as beautiful as it looks. So then they're not mad at me for buying the beautiful piece that doesn't function.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a powerful in, and also just a powerful
Mhm.
statement. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. For over 2 years now, I've been using Adaptive. It's an incredible game changer. It's AI technology based. It helps you with bill pay. And as a builder, there's very few things that anger our subs more than not being paid on time. Well, those days are gone. Not only do you know exactly where you are, but you can pay people through your ACH channels, making draws extremely quick. With one click of a button, which used to take hours, my office staff is now able to generate a draw to the bank or to the client in literally seconds. The thing that I appreciate the most about Adaptive is their ability to keep changing. We've given them 3 or 4 feedbacks on things that we need as builders, and within just a few months, they're rolling those things out. This is saving us hours per week and days per month in terms of our efficiency. If you're looking to upgrade your business, I'd highly recommend Adaptive. You can reach out to them at adaptive.com or listen to the Curious Builder podcast, episode 15 or episode 80, where we dive into their origin story. This episode is brought to you by Alpine Hardwood Flooring. They've been our partner now for over a decade, installing all our wood floors on all our new homes as well as our remodels. And on a personal level, Adam and Anthony Jankola, the owners, are just absolutely amazing people. They've been so supportive of my career as well as doing anything we need to make sure that our clients are happy. And they work so well with our other vendors and trade partners at not only protecting their product, but also ensuring everyone else's looks great. So if you're looking for a wood floor or for a refinish, I highly recommend Alpine Hardwood Flooring. It's important
Mhm.
for me to remind myself as somebody who builds homes we're there as a guide to our clients. And sometimes we're a guide and an expert. Sometimes we're just a guide.
Mhm.
I'm not the expert in closet, but you are. And
Mhm.
so an organization, so I can bring you in. It's no different than us bringing in our cabinet shop. Like I know what I
Right.
like in terms of woodwork, but I can't make, and there's hundreds of things like that in a home. And we're
Mhm.
introducing those on a limited basis, or the client is empowering us to
Mhm.
make decisions on their behalf. But ultimately,
Right.
not only do we want the house to be beautiful and aesthetic and artful and all those things, but a home is obviously very utilitarian. Like it needs
Oh
to
yeah.
fit their, and I'd say lifestyle is a word. Of
Mhm.
course, I think we'd all like more. Young families I assume they're doing a whole lot more laundry than other people
Mhm.
because the kids get so dirty so quick because they're
Oh yes.
constantly falling over, doing whatever. And anyway, laundry is a huge thing,
Oh yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
depending on who's doing the laundry or if it's shared duties or whatever, just making it
Mhm.
as easy as possible for the family to function so that the kids don't
Oh,
know.
absolutely.
So,
Well, and the biggest thing too is when someone's going to build a home, more than likely they're going to stay in it for a while. So it's also thinking about the growth of that family. And though maybe they have little kids as of right now, but as they grow into it, what kind of functions need to be introduced? So we do a lot of systems where we know like the 2 and the 4-year-old do not play 16 sports. But let's say in 10 years, they do play that many sports. So let's make sure the garages and the territory that like the sports would go into have enough space and enough function for those to work out and for it to be something where it says, okay, this is going to function for now, and you just grow into
mhm. Yeah. Where have you been my whole life?
it.
My garage is a thousand
Yeah, you
times
are the
better.
king of
Yeah,
hobbies.
I had so many hobbies. It's like I think part of your team was like, okay, how many sports does this household play? And it was all my stuff. My
Yeah.
kids weren't even old enough to have all the stuff. What is in terms of the leads that are coming your way
Mhm,
from a business standpoint? How often are they coming through professionals like a builder or remodeler or a
mhm.
designer versus how often are people finding you organically?
I would say probably 85 to 90% of our business is referral based from a previous client or from a friend of a friend kind of situation. So that's very powerful for us. And then I would say the rest of that is going to be a split between organic, your Google or Instagram lead, and then our partners. We have very strategic partnerships when it comes to people in Minnesota specifically because we are a luxury service. We offer a luxury product. We know that, and we know we're not for everybody, but we know that the value behind what we offer is something that really matters to certain partners. And I think the biggest thing that we always find too when we get any kind of referral in is we can tell right away what type of client they are and what type of needs they have. And so we're able to really tailor our messaging to them and our help to them based on what they need. If they're a whole house, I'm going to see you every month type client, that's a totally different message to them than it would be for a I have one space that bothers me kind of client.
Where are you finding that are some of the hottest items in terms of that need the most organization? If you were to go in terms of a list, where do you find that people find the most value in the services that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So high traffic areas are our number one priority, whether it's a pantry, kitchen, primary closet. Those are the biggest ones we see. Depending on if the family has kids, then obviously kids rooms as well. Kids are tiny tornadoes. They just take off their clothes and you can
That's so
literally see
true.
the line of
That's
like
so
where they
true.
go. You're like, oh, okay. And establishing, we like to say that we like to help kids a lot because then they grow up to be nice, organized humans. And that to parents is really sticks with them because they also don't want to be picking up their kids' clothes for their entire childhoods. So I think the kids' rooms, primary closets, kitchens, and pantries. Minnesota gets really popular right around this time actually with mud rooms and utility type spaces because we're thinking a lot more about the snow, the mess, the wet areas that can come into play.
Hmm. I know a lot of your, I believe anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the items that you're bringing are either branded or
Hmm.
walk us through a little bit of that. So I
Yeah.
have a lot of like in my closet for higher up stuff, whether it's sweaters
Hmm.
or watches or passports or whatever, and it has the
Hmm.
little label. They all
Yep.
match, right? There's a lot of,
Yep.
and you're not going to just any random store to get this stuff. I assume this is
Correct.
all Neat Method supplied.
Hmm.
How far, what are their range of products?
Hmm.
And what was the thought
So,
process besides obviously it's a good
yep.
business move on their front to do it, obviously, because you're buying it from them too. But
Hmm.
what was some of the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So we like to, so Neat Methods had products for a couple years now. And the biggest thing that we found is we've been using products from other manufacturers for years and just filling the void as to the products that we wish were on the market and we wish were being used. For instance, in your closet, you have these uh, Oxford bins, which are a fabric, but they have a structure to them. So it plays well with things that need to go in there that are more delicate, like clothing items or whatnot, because it's not going to snag or tear on anything. But it provides you the structure you need to throw the bin up there and toss it around and not have to worry about this flimsy sided bin that's not actually going to support you. So things like that, where we were just like, okay, we have to take a step back and see if we're providing the services, then the products have to match the service level of what we're providing. So pretty much the products that we really focus on are going to be various bins and baskets that are of higher grade material. So metals, acacia woods, fabrics as well, leathers, things of that nature. And then our in drawer dividers are another big thing that we work with. And that's going to be flexible for kind of any space, but primarily it focuses on like kitchens, sculleries, pantries, that area.
And when you decided, you had quite a robust background. I was joking with you before
Hmm.
you came on. Your history, you had 87 jobs. You've been an owner here for over 7 years.
Yeah.
You're a founder of Project Halicon, which I'm not quite sure what that
Hmm.
is, vice president of partner operations and director of marketing and business development,
Hmm.
marketing coordinator. So a lot of marketing in your background.
Hmm.
And we can talk a little bit about that if you want, but what made you decide to be an entrepreneur? And when you decided to do that, what was the catalyst that sort of made you change? Like you were a
hmm
founder of whatever Project Halicon, I didn't do any research on
hmm
what that was, but what made you
hmm
leave that to start Neat
Yeah.
Method?
So I was one of those victims of the economy way back in the mid 2000s. And when I graduated college, I really thought I wanted to be in sports and in marketing for, I had an internship with the Chicago Bulls and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. But that's back when they gave free internships in exchange for just fun things. And so I knew that wasn't really going to provide life because let's be real, coordinated seats are fun, but they can't pay your rent.
Yep.
And so I switched over into technology and just really focused on different companies that were within a startup incubator and going to go to market. And I really got fascinated with go to market strategies and basically like solving problems to make other people successful. And did that a lot through marketing partnerships, investor relations throughout the different kind of companies I worked with and companies I own, and really found a passion for solving people's problems. And also, I've always loved interiors design, just actual physical problems as well. And so when Neat Method came to market in 2011, I was really fascinated by it because it was something where I said, okay, this is something where I can provide an experience for more than one client, or the experience doesn't last as long. So we're not solving 6 months to year long problems. We're solving like things that are happening today that can be solved tomorrow. So that really got my just problem solving brain interested. And then the artistic side of me was like, well, what can be better than utilizing all these pretty products and design elements to actually help solve those problems?
And how did you find out about what Neat Method was? Like, why Neat Method? It seems like you're very capable. You could have done a number
Mm-hmm.
of different careers. What was it
Mm-hmm.
about the Neat Method, either philosophy
Yep.
or what was your intro there?
So it was two-sided. So one, because I'd had businesses I started from scratch before, it's extremely hard and it's very taxing. And while I loved it and I thrived off of it, I sat down and said, do I really want to do that again? Or do I want some help and some support in what I'm doing? And so Neat Math is a franchise. And I got a hold of them actually through a friend of mine who I went to college with and who had heard of it, because this was Instagram was, well, it was living, it wasn't as popular. So it wasn't really a social marketing kind of find. And I chatted with them and just figured out, yes, this is the kind of way I want to go. The support they offer and the nature of just the business itself is what I want to go towards, because I'd always been in more luxury high end spaces. And so it was thinking about what can I apply my skill sets and my business knowledge to make my next company.
Yeah, interesting. How long did that sort of courtship, if you will, go for where you were
Mm-hmm.
interviewing them and I assume they were interviewing you, or how does that process
Mm-hmm.
work in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, and I'll let you answer that question first, I guess.
Yeah, so it's definitely changed now, but 7, 8 years ago, it was definitely a process of, can you make a business succeed? The reality is, well, yes, we would love to just give these businesses to everybody. It's more so about, can you make this succeed? And do you have what it takes to deal with the kinds of clients that we deal with and just the type of lifestyle that we lead in terms of how we want Neat to be perceived. And so it's something where we really pride ourselves on. I have an organized home. I don't go home to a messy house. I have an organized system, a family, like those things. And I think that if I was a messy person and I couldn't keep my calendar straight, kind of thing, I would not be a good candidate for it. So a lot of the conversations we had in the beginning were just really, who are you and how do you function? And that's how I approach it to my team as well. When I go to hire people, I need to know that they're an organized human to start with, because if they're not, they're definitely not a match for this kind of business. And I think too, just general like people skills, like if you're not an outgoing person, if you don't have the ability to deal with the low end problems, the high end problems, and everything in between, then you can't work with these kind of situations. We're dealing with people's homes, their personal effects, and that's the most precious thing to most people. So the reality is, you have to have that respect level to deal with it.
Yeah, and to me, it's no different than any other company hires. It seems like it's very cultural focused. Literally, and a lot of times you're hiring people based on, again, the culture fit, their personality, disc assessments, all those kinds of
Mm-hmm,
things. Yours is like a physical manifestation of order, though.
mm-hmm,
Like, do you
mm-hmm.
ever, when you're hiring people, do you go and ask if you could actually go to their car or go into their home to see how they keep their own home?
There's a process. So typically, when I'm hiring, I like to see how they are, how they live. A lot of times it ranges, but if it's something where I'm like, you're a referral from a friend who I trust as an organized human, then that's a little bit different. But if you're a blind hire, then oh, absolutely, I want to see your spaces, because you can't be a representation of the Neat brand if you're not Neat yourself.
How do you, so this is a fascinating interview because there's got to be, evidently there's not, but like small business, we can do all kinds of different stuff. So
Hmm.
would this be a second interview? You'd interview, let's say you're interviewing me and say, Mark, hey,
Hmm.
this is a great first interview. Let's schedule a time to see your house. How do you avoid someone going and cleaning their house and having it look really great when they don't keep it?
Hmm.
Or can your eyes can see through?
So the biggest thing that we do is I always do a FaceTime interview for the first time. And so it's really easy to be like, just show me an organized space really fast. Because
Ah,
you, in that time, you can't, there's literally no way you can get it together. And people's variety of what they think is organized is very different. And it's changed over the years. But now, if you're wanting to work with Neat, you really have an idea of what Neat is based on what you can see from all of our various socials. Because we do behind the scenes, the before and afters, like the real live representation, the day in the life of. There's so much information where people can really understand who we are. And so a lot of times I can tell right away if someone's really wants to be in it because of what we do versus just it looks fun and that seems like a cool job. I've had my team now for quite a few years and we all can we could probably do it with our eyes closed, but it's also a representation of I trust and I know that these team members are going to portray and do what they're supposed to represent the brand properly. And we're just a well-oiled machine by this point.
Do you how big is your current team?
So my current team is 8 people, nine people, including me.
Wow, that's actually quite large. And how many, from
Hmm.
an operational standpoint, like today, you're
Hmm.
doing this interview. What does your day to day look like, your week to week, in terms of,
Hmm.
are you leading most of the sales? How often? Obviously, but on my particular case, you were there with 3 others.
Hmm.
But obviously,
Hmm.
if you have a team of 8, you personally can't be at every one of these. How do you run your
Hmm.
teams?
Yep. Yeah. In the beginning, I was very involved with projects like on a day-to-day basis, and now not so much just because I've trained everyone to be of what I can offer as well. So I usually handle a lot more of the behind the scenes, the sales, the marketing, operations, all that kind of jazz. I do still go to certain projects just depending on the level of complexity of them. For instance, like we were on a project last week where it was a very large, it was a 12,000 square foot home. So you've got a lot going on. You've also got, they were moving into it. So you have that.
Not a house that big, will you have your entire team of 8 there?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. On a typical normal project, you're going to see somewhere between 2 and 4. But for more complex, or if you've got more spaces, then more people will come. Myself, and then I have a project manager who runs a lot of the same things that I would be doing on a client project, talks to the clients, is in charge of the team, does all the product ordering, does all that kind of stuff. So I have them, and then I have just a level of actual organizers too who do the day to day. But the reality is, it's the depending on the type of project, it depends just how many people come.
Hmm. How often are you going back to someone's home on a, let's say, a regular basis? Or they just schedule
Hmm.
you quarterly, yearly, every couple of years? How does that, what are you
Yeah.
seeing as a trend?
So we've seen actually a lot more people sign up for our reoccurring maintenance service. And that's something where we, they could be monthly, they could be quarterly. We have a couple monthly and we have a couple quarterly. But a lot of that has to do with kids, whether it's their clothing, their toys, their whatever it is. Because if you think about it as a parent, like I have a daughter and I'm constantly trying to see which clothes fit my kid and like constantly trying to cycle through them. And it is the biggest pain in the butt. And so when we talk to parents, they're like, we'll come and go through your kids' clothes. They're like, you will? And just that in of itself, taking that task off a parent is huge because as you probably know, your kid will show up one day wearing capris when they should be leggings. And you're like, huh,
That's so
you
funny.
might need some new
That's so
clothes.
funny to say that, because like you'd like to think that kids don't care, but kids are so, at least mine are so
Mm-hmm.
tactile that everything that they
Mm-hmm.
touch, if it doesn't fit, like my middle son Simon, if it's not super comfortable, if it's too tight or too loose,
Mm-hmm.
he's a little bear, like it has to be just right. And
Yeah.
like my wife just bought him a new jacket, and it's, oh, maybe an inch too long in the sleeves. But
Mm-hmm.
kids are impossible to buy for because they're tweener.
Right.
They just change so quickly. Anyway, he was grumping this morning as I was getting him off to school, and I was like, dude, like obviously he can't relate to this, but I'm like, just roll up the sleeve, because guess what? By the end of the winter, this thing's going to fit perfectly. Your mom has done a great job getting you a new jacket. How about let's be thankful
Mm-hmm.
for what we have? And then my
Right.
little guys, Tate, he puts on a shirt today, and it was a long sleeve because it was a little colder today, and
Mm-hmm.
he looks like the Hulk. It's like up to his elbow. It's, I don't even know what you call those t-shirts. They make some, this
Yeah.
was not designed to be whatever those
Yeah.
shirts are called, where they're like
Uh-huh.
mid-arm
The
ones.
3/4.
Oh,
Yep.
he
Mm-hmm.
hates those. They just go bananas. And he's like, why? And he's literally trying to pull it to the end. It was really funny, actually. But it's just what it rolled with it. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I can relate to the pain as a parent.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of clients will see on a recurring basis for tasks that we've already done for them or for
Hmm.
projects we've done that we're just maintaining. Other clients, we might start in one space and then you gradually see them go to more spaces. So that there's that approach too. And then a lot of clients actually move a lot. So we see them often for
Yeah.
moving. We've had clients in the past
Will you
like
help?
for 2 years.
Do you help them pack up and all that stuff too?
We don't pack, but we will unpack them. So we will arrange their move. So literally, like we could have a client go on vacation, go up to their cabin or something, and move them while they're gone, and they have to do absolutely nothing.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 20 years, I've been using Pella windows, and I couldn't be happier to call them as a business partner, a trade partner, and someone that really supports us in our quality builds. We use wood windows and doors on every single one of our homes, and 98% of every home that I've ever built has been a Pella window. I've gotten to know their team here locally as well as nationally, and the way that they support us as a craftsman, as well as they support our homeowners with their lifelong guarantee, has actually been a game changer for me. So when people ask me who I use, I recommend Pella. If you want to hear more about Pella's story, you can listen to episode 1, where I interview Peter and Ed from Pella Northland about their journey into the Pella ownership.
And I think a lot of people find that like amazing because they don't want to deal with the stress behind moving. And especially we have clients who they haven't moved for 15 years. So to them, it's like it's a very big deal versus clients who do move all the
You
time.
know, as we're coming up on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and
Hmm.
I don't think I'd have the budget to do this, but the idea I think would be solid. And I want to ask one question before I ask the question I
Hmm.
really want to ask is like, how far out are you right now? If somebody calls you and says,
Yep.
we need to get on your schedule, how far out would you be?
Hmm.
Like, I'm trying to get an understanding of like your backlog.
Yeah. Typically fall and winter we're 3 weeks out, and then summer we're more like a month and a half out.
Wow, that's pretty good backlog.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
as a business owner, do you ever think so? If you staffed up a few more people, you would
Hmm.
decrease your backlog, but then would you ever burn out? Would you ever have you ever worried that hey, we're going to run out of work, or has that never really been an issue?
Oh, we have definitely in the past. Winters can be long sometimes in Minnesota. So I think it really just depends. We have a lot of clients who are snowbirds. So the other aspect too is they're just physically not in Minnesota in the winter. So they don't need any help. And then I think I like to say January is usually pretty decent because we're coming off the new year and a lot of people just have a lot of stuff they need to get rid of. But as you get into the true deep winter, it gets a little more challenging because you are in your space, so you want your stuff around you a bit more than if you're, going into a milestone of the kids are getting out of school for the year. I want to be really organized for summer, or like in summer, people move all the time. So that's a big thing. And then in the fall, everyone's preparing for the holidays. So they want to make sure all the spaces look nice and neat for family to come or for Santa to come or those aspects. And so it really just depends. But I would say I wouldn't ever probably think about staffing up above what I have just because we can manage a certain amount of projects right now that I'm comfortable with. I know that I also have one of the larger teams when it comes to neat. A lot of people paying more at the like 4 to 5
You
people
mean
range.
compared to the other 100 that are in the country?
Yep.
Yeah.
And some have big teams and some just don't. But I think it's all personal owners' preference on how they do things. And to me, also, it just is a matter of does this client seem like they need 8 people in their house at the same time, or is two kind of enough for them
I
because it overwhelms
I mean,
them?
where I was really going with this is what a great gift this would be. I think
Hmm.
lately, the last couple of years, I'm much more interested. I think back of like gifts that people have given. I'm a sentimental
Hmm.
person and love
Hmm.
languages. Not that I don't like gifts. I certainly like thoughtful gifts, but it puts a lot of
Hmm.
pressure sometimes on somebody to come up with a thoughtful gift. And I was thinking as a
Hmm.
business, right now we're putting together something to give to our past clients, current clients
Hmm.
for the holidays here, which is
Yep.
roughly what we think when this episode will air. But my
Yep.
point is, from an experience standpoint, it makes me
Hmm.
want to say, hey, I will give the gift of the neat method to a client as like
Hmm.
a thank you. How
Yep.
often do people gift your
Yeah.
services to another person?
It actually happens quite frequently. We actually do a lot of realtors closing gifts to clients. We find that's a really popular one. We do a lot of gift cards around the holidays and for specific things like Mother's Day is a big one, birthdays are big ones where someone's been begging, I just want to hire someone to help me. And it's a really nice surprise. The amount of clients we have where their husbands arrange it for their wives, and their wives are like, oh my God, it was a dream. That's all I wanted.
And
Really lovely
I
to see.
yeah, I like that. How do you facilitate that? They would have to, so it can't really be a surprise. They'd have to be there because I'm sure if someone gave this not to my wife because she's so clean, but if you gave it to someone else and you started chucking their clothes,
Hmm.
like that might not end so well.
Yep.
So how do you manage
Yep.
that?
So we do a lot of gift cards and we just leave it that way is probably the
I
easiest
see.
way. We've done it before where a husband buys a gift card and then he sets up the consult with his wife as her birthday present. And so like that kind of aspect too. And then we've also had it too where, a realtor is gifting it to their client and it's just a gift card because they
Right.
can use it in any aspect of the home. But I think it just depends too. A lot of the builders we work with, they like to gift it to their clients around Christmas as well because it encourages them in the new year to do a new project. So it's a lead generation for
This is
builders
this
because
is great. I have a
yeah.
feeling that you're going to get a lot of business out of this because the gears are already turning. So I might as well ask the question that everyone's going to ask
Yeah.
is from a cost standpoint. Let's do this
Hmm.
twofold. I know it's going to be it depends. So if this is
Yep.
a custom off, so let's pair this into two. Walk us through
Hmm.
your normal sales process of how you come up with a
Hmm.
cost, and then
Hmm.
B, my next question would be like, how do I gift something to a client? Because obviously I have to pay
Hmm.
for it ahead of time. Because I
Hmm.
don't think most people would probably do an open-ended check on whatever the client wants. They'd probably say, "Hey, it's going to be 500,000, 1,500."
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
putting some sort of limit
Hmm.
on it, and then if the client wants to
Right.
go over, that's on them. Walk us
Yep.
through those two models, if you will.
Yep. Yep. So our kind of initial process is pretty easy because it's a matter of figuring out what the problem is and finding a solution. So let's say your problem is your kitchen, then we're going to be thinking about the solutions for that. If it comes to something where you are looking at it from a gifting perspective, then it's going to be square footage based. So I think about, okay, if you're thinking like this client could use it for this beautiful custom pantry you built them, I would just want to know what's the square footage because only so much can fit into certain square feet, knowing like you've built out a pantry or if you have pictures of a pantry, I can quote it pretty well based on that. And then tell you like, okay, so it's going to cost you $1,000 for hours and maybe another $1,000 in products. And we just figure out you're going to pay for hours and they're going to pay for products. Like we're very agile when it comes to that stuff. But I think the biggest thing is we charge an hourly rate per human and then per hour. And pretty much the average is a walk-in closet is somewhere between 7 to 10 hours, just depending on how much stuff you have and the square footage of the closet. I would say our average can be done in a day. So if we're done in a day with 3 people, you're looking at 75 an hour times that. I would say the biggest variable is always going to be the type and style of products people want because for us we want something that's going to last you and really be really functional. Sometimes clients want to use their products they already own. Sometimes clients don't really care. Sometimes clients want very high end items. So that's a little more like unsure when it comes to things. What I typically say to clients and to referral clients, let's put it that way. So a builder, a realtor, a designer, that kind of thing. If they already know there's a space that they're going to need help with, then I always tell them to aim towards that space versus just a general blanket of like their home. And a lot of times it'll be, so for instance, I have gained a very long term client just from the fact that their closet drove them nuts. We've now moved them several times and linked them with several builders to figure out exactly what kind of house they want to build and exactly what kind of style they want to be. And it's funny because Morgan and I worked together on a client who bought a home where we said to them, we need about $30,000 in closet changes and we need several other built-ins made and we need that kind of thing because as you move a family into a new space or a spec type space, you have to adjust it to be exactly what that family needs. And if they have the budget to do that, it's a great win for everybody.
Would it ever, so what about a model home? So like we're designing our first spec home in like 12 or 13 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting a lot of thought into the philosophy behind what is inspiring the build. And we're creating an entire marketing campaign around it. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a touchstone in terms of a person to design around.
Mm-hmm.
That's we won't talk about that on this podcast. Is a whole nother separate thing. But like, how would you would you do a generic design around what people would like to impress upon people? If someone came into your model home and they saw a pantry, let's say you picked the
Mm-hmm.
three biggest things. You said the kitchen, the pantry, and
Mm-hmm.
the owner's suite. To me,
Mm-hmm.
I'd add the fourth, which would probably be the garage. There's been so
Mm-hmm.
much value that I've seen in the garage space
Mm-hmm.
since you've done it for us. Anyway, how would you invest in that, or how should somebody look at doing that as a value
Yep.
add as a way to sell their home?
Yep. An easy thing for a spec home or one that's going to be on an artisan tour, parade of homes type thing. We do a lot of products within those homes to show people how they actually functionally utilize them. One of the biggest obstacles we know that people can't do is visualize. They actually need to physically see something in a house. So if they're walking into a closet, for instance, they're like, I don't know if my clothes would fit in here. Well, if we can fit 200 hangers, you can fit 200 pieces of clothes. So, like adding those elements where it helps people sell the spaces actually because they can physically see their stuff in it.
So you'll put the 200 hangers in an empty closet
Hmm.
just to have them hanging there?
Hmm.
Interesting.
And we've done it too, just where we show off, okay, here's what it would look like if these bins were in here, or here's what it would look like to function within this home. And it's something too where you provide the value to the builder because it's the house can sell faster when it has things in it. It's very much like staging. You're just staging spaces that are already built in. or it's looking at it from a client perspective of then I can actually visually see myself in here, or you get it from the other perspective of if you're on some kind of home tour, it's prime marketing for everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm already, yeah, I think you're going to have to, I think we're going to have to work something out of my spec home. I think everyone should, based on what you just said. It is interesting having built now for a long time and had a lot of show homes. I look back at the homes that we did early on, and I get we're at a different price point, and I'm not knocking anyone
Mm-hmm.
that does this, and we're at a different strata today than we were then. But it's like you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to cut costs because you think that maybe your value statement or maybe the client's value statement is such
Mm-hmm.
that you don't think they'll spend. It used to be, I remember, man, when I first started, we'd do a $1,200 closet alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically
Mm-hmm.
just the owner's suite for some wire. This is 20 years
Yep.
ago. And now it
Oh
makes
yeah.
me cringe. Now it's 10 to 20,000 easily
Mm-hmm.
just for, and that wouldn't be over the top really high end. That would just be nice, not
Yeah.
amazing, not bad, just nice. And
Solid shelves,
yeah,
not
so
wire shelves. Yep.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And drawers, I'm a big fan of drawers. And there's so
Mm-hmm.
many places you can go, but like you go into a closet that has, it's just, you feel better about your space. I just met a lady
Mm-hmm.
today. Oddly enough, she cut it from her budget for financial reasons, but she said that when she drives into her garage, she wants it to feel like she drove into her house. Like she
Yep.
wants it really high end. And it was interesting
Right.
to hear her talk like that. Also, she realized even though she values it, she's going to do that later. But I
Mm-hmm.
found that a refreshing point of view, that
Yeah.
the epoxy on the walls to the paint to how
Mm-hmm.
to they have huge windows in their garage, the natural light,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just think of builders in general, at least for myself, I've definitely have thought about closet and storage the wrong way, mainly because the house is empty. So of course it's clean, but it's also not
Mm-hmm.
realistic. I've had a number of people come through a home that's styled and it looks beautiful, and one of their first thoughts, they say, I could never keep my house this way. And that's a wormhole. It could go in a number of different directions based on if that's true. But I think
Right.
sometimes if you show somebody the blueprint, going back to the method or the
Mm-hmm.
neat method in this case, I think showing the closet organization, showing the garage, I think that would be something that would be, I would actually really like to do that on our next home. So we'll have to talk a little bit
Yeah.
more, not only about the closets, but really the garage would be super cool. I think
Yeah.
that's a really incredible space to design.
Yeah. The garages actually are very, very popular and have become more popular in the last year because I think to your point, people are realizing like this is a space that I actually do live in and I do store things in. I noticed a lot of new builds are actually going away from your traditional storage rooms because they're putting that space towards another aspect of a home, whether it's like a gym or a sauna or whatever. And the garage now has become their primary storage space. So we're coming up with creative solutions when it comes to things like, okay, are we doing things that hang from the ceiling and they electronically go up and down? And that's where you put stuff that you use like once a year. Or are we building in cabinets? Or are we building in sports equipment holders? Like just things like that to make it functional. Because as all parents know, driving over some kind of sporting equipment as you pull into your garage is it's painful because you paid for that and now the bike is broken, things of that nature. But also, again, just making it functional. You only have so much space in a garage, so you need it to be functional.
I think this goes back to us as builders, really, and designers of helping paint the picture of lifestyle. And the problem
Mm-hmm.
is, I can just think back in my own career, landscaping for a long time, closets. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of things that you maybe would put in, but they're the first things the client takes out because they would rather
Mm-hmm.
have their kitchen. Their kitchen is
Mm-hmm.
usually their non-negotiable or their owner suite or
Mm-hmm.
their great room. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
thinking in those terms. And a lot of people, whether I agree with them or not, it's irrelevant. They look at landscaping as something that they could defer to a later point. The truth is, very few people do it later. And so, and a big part of architecture in of how a home feels is how the landscaping goes into it. And where I'm going with
Mm-hmm.
this is like the garage. It used to be that we did garages that were completely unfinished. They'd just be 2x4
Mm-hmm.
studs and no insulation.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Mm-hmm.
it would just be drywall but no paint. And then this, obviously there's a price tag for all this stuff, that
Right.
as the homes escalate, the expectations of what these rooms look like also elevate.
Oh, for sure.
And
Yep.
and I think it's funny. I don't, you've been in a lot of homes, and this is where I'd like to spend
Mm-hmm.
maybe the last 10 minutes, just maybe some funny stories or some shocking
Sure.
stories that you could actually share, because I just think it'd be really funny. But one is, I would suspect that if you went into somebody's garage and their garage was
Mm-hmm.
really organized, would I be wrong in saying that the rest of their house is probably really put together? Because don't you think that the garage is probably the
Yes.
last thing that someone would
Yes.
spend time organizing?
Yes. Garages and storage spaces, when those are organized, then they definitely live an organized lifestyle because there is nothing Like no one puts the money into that. They drive in and they move along, they go inside the house. That's where they need to put the money. So when you see them focusing on the garage or on a storage space, both which are used but very utilitarianly used, that to me then says, okay, I care about my whole experience, not just my inside experience.
Yeah, yeah. How tell us some funny stories. I should have started with this as the hook because
Yeah.
I imagine you've either found some really interesting things. I'm sure you find
Oh,
money. I'm
yes.
sure people live in their place
Uh-huh.
for a long time. You
Oh, yeah.
find all kinds of weird things. And rather than me guessing, like what are some funny things
Oh,
you've
yeah.
found or like where a client would be like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, I didn't even know that was still here." Or I'm sure
Oh,
there's
yeah.
passports and birth certificates and all kinds of stuff that they didn't know.
Mhm.
What have you got for some funny stories here?
I think so. A lot of them I can't
Yeah,
completely share,
sure.
but a lot of the funny stuff that we tend to see is going to be stuff that clients will be like, "Oh, that was like 2 ex-wives ago," or things where you're just like, "What happened?" Like, or we've had a few instances where we find stuff and the wife will be like, "Huh, not mine." And you're like, "Oh, okay." We've had some situations where like we find liquor in teenage kids' rooms and we're
Oh,
like, and as parents, we're all like, okay, do we want this kid to get in trouble? Would this kid get in trouble? It's like a whole thought process about like in reality, we could just move it and put it back and nothing would ever happen. But it's a very moral dilemma. We've had a lot of situations where you walk into a space and the client thinks they're like super duper organized and you open a closet and like stuff falls on you and you're like, how is this organized? Like what exactly happened here? No, and I would say we have some very favorite clients. We're like, we have a client who she's been with us for, oh gosh, probably 6 years now. She's gained like 3 children along the way. So I feel like, yeah, 6 years. And she started out, she is the most organized person I've ever met in my life. And yet we see her at least once a quarter because she has several children and she needs things to cycle and function and be so like military precision because that is how she has to live her life. But she is one of the people where you drive into her garage and you know the program and you know what's happening because her garage is to a T. And so it's really interesting because we get clients like that where we'll go back and we'll help them, but I don't know that they necessarily would need us, but for them, it's a need. But then we have clients where we wish we could go back because we just watch what happens in like the overnight since we've been there and been like, we made you a whole bin for all of this stuff you just threw on the floor. So it's that process of like just figuring out what type of client you're dealing with. We've dealt with a lot of athletes and a lot of people who you just laugh at the what is important to them versus what's not important to them. To us normal humans, like a kitchen, a pantry, having those stocked is important. Sometimes to them, they're like, the shoes. Tell me about the shoes. And it's okay. Could I tell you where your spoons are? Like,
No, yeah, yeah. Like I don't need to eat. I need to know
yeah.
my shoes. It's funny because I'm picturing like a Nike wall that's lit up that has, and obviously people, I don't know, but if I was a professional athlete and I spend a lot of time in shoes, I suspect I would have a pretty
Mhm.
sweet shoe collection. That so I can only imagine some of the cool stuff that you get to see.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, it is for sure. We just shared a reel actually of one of our favorite athletes' clients and the amount of shoes he has. It's just incredible and amazing in every color you can think of. So it's a very beautiful closet as well because it's just a rainbow of shoes.
because I've always wanted to have a client like that just because I think it'd be real. I just like really artistic and just different things. I
Hmm.
think that's unique. I think
Hmm.
anytime you get a chance to be a part of something that's unique or different or
Hmm.
just I think that's what's fun about clients in general
Oh, yeah.
is the fact that you get to enter into their space and there's something different or unique. I can imagine we built the house. I'm wondering like hunting stuff. And I
Hmm.
remember when we were doing the design, the client wanted, just because he had at his old house, he had all his
Hmm.
hunting shotguns and
Hmm.
jackets and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff in a big safe in his garage, plus whatever. And his wife was talking about the smell. And I said, you're building a new home. We can actually design. And unfortunately, we were actually already in, for whatever reason, it didn't come up
Hmm.
sooner, or I didn't ask the right question. Maybe that was on me. But it turns out that underneath the garage, or sorry, underneath the front stoop, we were able to do spancrete. So we
Hmm.
must not have been able, we must have been before, it must have been in planning after all.
Yeah.
And so we did spancrete and we actually created a space underneath the front stoop of the house. And that ended up being a dedicated, not instead of a sport court, it was and it's much smaller, but it was
Yeah.
basically like a robust, plus it was here, it was surrounded by concrete and a clamshell door, and all his hunting stuff was in there. His wife loved it because it was out of the garage. He loved it because it was
Hmm.
like a dedicated space, and he was a
Hmm.
really neat, orderly person. But that part,
Yep.
I guess it was the client that was unique. We just got a chance
Yep.
to respond to that uniqueness and come up with a design
Right.
innovation that, really made it fun for everybody.
Oh yeah. We've done that several times. We actually this coming week we have a client who has a whole hunting room
Mhm.
that's off the back of the house adjacent to the garage. Basically, we planned it where it the items never have to go into the physical home and they never have to be with the normal things. They can go around and not be touched in any manner. It doesn't have to go through the house, down the stairs, that kind of thing. We've had clients where they have car lifts that are very unassuming. Like you would never know driving to this person's house that the bottom of the garage actually goes to the basement. So designing spaces where it can function and be mobile for when the car needs to be lifted down versus when it is up in the normal sense, because then otherwise they've got a giant, basically second garage full of nothing. And so coming up with solutions like that where you're dealing with a very niche item, but it is important to that homeowner. So coming up with the solutions where you're like, sure, we'll just make all your storage on wheels and here's your plan on how to move it or things of that nature.
Have you it's interesting, like closet or sorry, cars. How
Uh-huh.
often do you get called to organize somebody's car? Because I look at obviously any parent with small children in car seats, anytime you get your car detailed, you're like, oh my word,
Hmm.
how is there that much food in your seat? And
Hmm.
how is this possible? And
Yeah.
even if you vacuum regularly, you're just like you're appalled that like kids just
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know if they're hiding it or what. But
Yeah.
anyway, I guess going back to more of an organizational standpoint, are there car organizers? I feel like cars could
Yeah.
use some organization as well, especially
Oh yeah.
with families.
Yep, we do a lot of car recommendations. We don't do a ton of like actual organizing within them. It's more so here's the systems to put in your cars. Where we have dealt with more car stuff is the people who have a lot of car maintenance items. So it's more so creating those systems to keep your
Oh,
cars up
sure.
to date.
Like in the
And
garage,
then
like
just
tool chests and that kind of stuff. Okay,
mhm,
that might make
mhm,
tons of
yep.
stuff.
Yeah, but more so on a physical car. I always just say, especially as a mom, I have organizers throughout the car just to keep certain things because obviously, like I have a 2 year old, she's hungry, just I have to always have a
Oh,
snack.
it's for
But
sure.
it's also thinking about those things where I'm like, okay, once she has a snack, where do I put the trash? Is it a messy snack? Do I need wipes? Like the whole thought process of it versus just being like, food, got it.
That's it. That's I really appreciate that you're thinking back to the process or this method. There was something you had said that sort of triggered a thought. Let's see, what was it here? It was about food. Oh shoot. I guess it wasn't that important. It was something I wanted to ask
It'll
you.
come back
It'll
to
come
you.
back to me. Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was about order. So only
Hmm.
just I guess I'll speak for myself because that was my question. So let's say
Hmm.
you organize a closet, you've got left to
Hmm.
right on the upper, you've got shirts. And I
Hmm.
tend to like to organize stuff from light to dark colors. I don't know why.
Hmm.
But then lately it's like I've noticed like with my pants that I tend to wear the same stuff on a regular basis. And if you're going to introduce variety, you have to have a method to do so. What I've started to
Hmm.
do is if I pull something out of the right middle, I rotate it
Hmm.
to the far left. And that way I always know
Mm.
that what I just wore or what I've worn recently, if it comes out of the
Hmm.
wash, I just keep putting it to the left. So basically it'll cycle my clothes
Hmm.
like on a kind of a domino effect.
Right,
And
right.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that does this, or maybe I am. But
Yep.
tell me a little bit about what do you tell people? Like some people want to look at their closet and they want to just
Hmm.
look like left to
Hmm.
right is light to dark, and that's always going to be the
Hmm.
case. But then for me,
Hmm.
it's I would always pick the same clothes. So mine is to get
Hmm.
variety. What
And
is
function.
this
Yep.
something that's common, or walk me through your
Yeah.
reaction to that?
So much of it is going to be based on the client and the needs of the client. Mainly where we start is each category of clothing goes through a color process and then a function process. We always put tops on top and bottom on bottom. And then long hang is your area where it's going to be more like dresses, longer items, coats, whatever it might be. Then a lot of times it's kind of client and space preference on things like sweaters or certain pant items. Like some people like their jeans folded, some like them hung. It just depends because again, we're building solutions that are going to work for you. We're not building them to work for us. And so why we do that too is when we ask all those questions, we're thinking of those. So for you, you're like, I need to like have this cycle of clothing. Great. Totally fine because that's what needs to work for you. You don't want necessarily the color coding aspect because you pick a top and you pick a bottom. But for some clients, they have outfits pre-planned in their mind for a month. So for them, we need to make it function for that sake, where they're like, I'm getting this top with this sweater with this skirt. I'm thinking of things that way. So a lot of it just relates back to the actual function that client needs of their space.
I think would be really fascinating is to have you go to this would almost be like we have the parade of homes where people get to go
Yeah.
and look at homes and art. It'd be really
Uh-huh.
funny to bring you to 5 people's homes with 3
Mhm.
people behind you, just like observing. And then you would just, it would be like the husband and wife, but they weren't allowed to talk. And then
Oh,
this is like a game show or a reality TV show.
like
Where,
figure them
yeah,
out.
exactly. Like the psychology of what, like how much could you
Mhm.
infer, like almost like Doctor, or not Dr. Seuss,
Mhm.
wrong doctor, Sherlock Holmes. I don't know why I said
Yes.
Dr. Seuss,
Yes.
but you could Sherlock Holmes this thing. You would look at it,
Uh-huh.
and that would be why. I don't know why. I think I'm getting more and more interested in people's like little ticks and idiosyncrasies,
Uh-huh.
because I find them really interesting and unique. And there's everyone's is so different. And obviously,
Right.
people you know better. Sometimes, have you ever known someone that you know really well, but then it takes someone else to say something like, "Oh yeah, all right." Like we just posted a reel.
Mhm.
My marketing admin, I didn't realize that every time I start a video, I start like a selfie video, not like a podcast or whatever. I say, all right. And then I start, that's not, I don't know if you saw the video on Instagram. It is funny. And I'm cracking up. My whole family's dying laughing because like evidently that's like something that I do, but I was
The start, yeah.
completely unaware of it. Anyway, I'd just
Mhm.
be curious, like from clothing and organization, what you could actually
Yeah.
infer
We
about
can
people.
we can infer a lot. I like to say we're trained at this point to look at the clues as to how someone lives. If you leave a beverage on a nightstand, I'm going to know what your variety of human is right away. And I'm going to know if your bed is
What do
made.
you mean?
I'm going to
What do you mean by
know.
that? If,
So, for instance, if a bed's not made, then I'm going to know that you rush in the morning and you don't prioritize tasks like that in the morning. So, I'm going to know that your system needs to be very efficient and very quick.
Interesting.
If you have multiple beverages, I kind of omit water. Like I keep water by the bed, but like people who where I see like a wine glass or if I see another beverage kind of thing, I know that they spend a lot of time at night in bed. So their nightstands need to be functional for things like an iPad, reading materials, glasses, things of that nature. So you look at it right away in terms of just how they live and you can infer things pretty easily. When it comes to a closet, you can typically tell what they wear based on what is in the laundry, what's on the floor, what is still perfectly on a hanger, no one's ever touched it, what still has a tag on it.
What has dust on it?
Uh-huh. Exactly.
I had a black suit the other day. I actually wore it to a funeral and then I wore it to a gala, but that was like my twice a year. And as I looked at the
You
shoulders,
wore
I'm
it.
like, I dusted it off, obviously, but I have not worn that black suit in quite some time. And so anyway, it's just funny to your point. It
Mhm.
is also on the far outside of my
Right.
closet. Like it's not in the dead center.
Hmm.
And
But it's also something that helps us figure out too when clients are like, I just don't know what I should get rid of, or I don't know what to get rid of. It's pretty obvious if something is dusty or like clearly has ever been worn, or it's like in a pantry, for instance. If your cans are expiring now, then you definitely are not using that, and you definitely won't use that because the amount of time it takes for a can to expire is a long time.
we just respect our time here. We should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
But man, now it's funny. Now the juices are flowing on some interesting little ticks, but that's probably all personal stuff. Um, we'll have everything in the show notes if people, especially local builders, remodelers, or designers, or anybody here in Minnesota. Right now, I'm thinking that you're going to be inundated with years of work because anyone that isn't giving their client like the gift of the neat method upon closing, or just as
Hmm.
a nice gift, honestly, it's really, really cool. Both it's thoughtful. Yeah, I really not only appreciate what you did for me personally, but just hearing about this, it's reshaping how I want to even design my parade home, my artisan home. And so anyway, we'll
Hmm.
be in touch about that for sure. On a personal
Absolutely.
side, what do you like to do when you're not organizing people's lives?
I have a 2-year-old, so I keep very busy with her.
Yep.
But I'm a big fan of just getting outside and really embracing like the feeling of art. So the work week is done, and now we're gonna have a glass of wine and we're gonna sit and observe the right now snow, but just refreshment of the outside.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.